Customers that run SQL Server on the Linux platform will be glad to know that a number of improvements have been made that bring Linux installations much closer to feature parity with SQL Server 2019 on Windows. Here's some of the highlights. New for 2019 is support for SQL Server replication on Linux. Replication allows database objects to be copied between databases and then synchronizes changes to the objects to maintain consistency. In SQL Server 2019, SQL Server on Linux with the SQL Server Agent service can act as a publisher, distributor, or subscriber in a snapshot, merge, or transactional replication. This will help keep data synced across the enterprise. Instances of SQL Server on Linux can now initiate and participate in distributed transactions through a Linux version of the Microsoft Distributed Transaction Coordinator service. The Coordinator service runs on the SQL Server process rather than in the host operating system, but it functions similarly to the MSDTC service on Windows. With this new capability, SQL Server instances on Linux and in Docker containers can maintain transactional consistency with one another, and ensure that any changes across multiple servers pass the ACID test, that they're atomic, consistent, isolated, and durable before they're committed. Linux users can now take advantage of machine learning services. These include the extensions of R and Python that were previously released in SQL Server on Windows, as well as new support for the Java language in 2019. Machine learning and programming extensions are an add-on to the database engine that can be added to Linux OS installations using the package manager for the OS. Machine learning services can also be added to SQL Server running in Docker containers using a Docker file to build a customized image. And finally, the authentication process in SQL Server on Linux has received some dramatic improvements in SQL Server 2019. You can now connect the server instance to an Active Directory domain controller to authenticate users for replication, for distributed queries, and to participate in availability groups that are authenticated by Active Directory. SQL Server 2019 on Linux also brings support for OpenLDAP and third-party Active Directory providers, which makes it easier to manage domain-joined Linux servers. So these four major additions to SQL Server on Linux, coupled with a host of additional minor improvements, make Linux installations just as capable as their Windows counterparts. These enhancements will only make it easier for administrators to move back and forth between platforms.